This is Smiles TV. Smiles Television Talk Show. I'm your host, Stephanie Anthony Mountain. You're watching the best community affairs broadcast in the United States. I used to say the Midwest, but you know we're going national very soon. So globally, you're watching the best community affairs broadcast. This is our first live broadcast. Bear with us. I haven't done this, and I'm not going to tell you how many years because you'll try to figure out how old I am, and we're not doing that. So bear with us. This is the first live broadcast, and I am excited to have someone here, a young lady who's doing great things in the East St. Louis, Chicago, just all over the country. Devin Moody Graham. You're going to love her. She taught me all I know about the internet and just social media. Devin Moody Graham will be with us, and she is our CEO mom. That's right. Moms are important. Moms do great things, and Devin's going to show you how. In the second half of our broadcast, which will not be live, but in the second half, we have What's on Your Mind with Dr. Dez, Dr. Desiree Holmes, our resident psychologist, and you know how great and gracious she is. She brought a gracious guest with her as well, and her name is Dr. Keisha Ross. You're going to love this broadcast today. Don't go away. Remember, Jesus Christ was born of a virgin. He was crucified and buried, and he rose on the third day. Confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord. Believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, and thou shalt be saved. Stay tuned for more Smiles. Devin Moody Graham is my guest, but before we go to Devin, I have to give a shout out to a young lady from East St. Louis, Illinois. She's been doing a local broadcast live for a long time, and I actually texted her last night and said, help me. I'm going to need your help. Latricia Brown, and she's from East St. Louis. She comes on Saturday nights at 6 o'clock p.m. on Charter Cable Channel 984 in the Southern Illinois area. And Carol Daniel, my favorite voice from KMOX Radio, and now with Pastor Dudley, you know I'm watching you, and I'm gaining great insights as well. Thank you so much. Devin, thank you for coming to Smiles. Give me a hug.
Thank
God
you for
bless
having
you.
me.
This is Devin Moody Graham. And Devin, how have you been?
I've been amazing.
You have been amazing. And you are a CEO mom, Chief Executive Officer. First of all, let's start with the family, the mom part, because, you know, God allowed me to raise 3 children, and I know how difficult it is to juggle that. Tell me about being a CEO mom and that concept.
Well, my first time being a mom was 13 years ago. So my oldest is 13, and knowing that I wanted to have this life where I was able to be very available for my children, but I had a lot of dreams, and so I had to rearrange some things. It was my senior year in college, and I was going to be getting my first degree and also having a child. And so I just had to figure out what that looked like. And so when I started consulting about 10 years ago, I really liked the way that I was able to have flexibility with him, and then my family grew upon marriage.
Wait, hold on. I got to stop because she said 10 years ago. Look at this child here, right? She only looks 20, right? So 10 years ago, you started consulting.
Yes.
Okay, let's start there. Tell us a little bit about your consulting.
So I come from a family of entrepreneurs. My mom is a cosmetologist. My grandmother had a cosmetology school. My dad has been a cobbler for over 50 years. And so I grew up around that. And ultimately, I knew I would probably do something with business because I started my first business when I was 10. And so with that piece, it was really learning about people, learning about supply and demand, and I knew that I liked to spend money at a very early age, so I had to figure out how to make money.
Okay, just recently, I actually saw you on Channel 5 in St. Louis, and the CEO mom part, you just had some workshops or something. Enlighten us about that as well.
Yes. So what happened was I was they reached out to me actually about that, and I had recently been named a National Small Business Champion by Sam's Club and SCORE through a contest where they selected. After the contest and you met the requirements, you have to really talk what's unique about your business. And when I talked about what I did for moms and my passion for making sure that moms don't have deferred dreams. That was really, I guess, the winning point. And so I was selected to attend a training in Reno, Nevada last month, where I was able to meet people and gain resources to help my business grow. And so I spoke about that. I also brought on one of my CEO moms, Tandra Taylor, who is a soap artisan, who has an organic line of soaps, and really just that there are different needs that mom entrepreneurs need, especially when you have young children. And so really working around with those moms, as well as I work with moms who have adult children, because they've put their dreams on hold for years until they're able to actually, you know, go full forward.
And I'm not able to see this because we are live, and I want to just tell Cesarine, if you will, if you kind of flash some of her photos to show the audience some of the things that she's done as we're talking, that would just be great. I remember something called Youth Biz, and the biz. Tell me about that and break that down.
So I started working in youth entrepreneurship about 8 years ago, and it really just came from a need. When I came home from college, University of Illinois, I wanted to volunteer with the JA program. So I was a part of Junior Achievement when I was in middle school and high school. And when I got back, the program no longer existed. And so they asked if I wanted to volunteer in other cities. I wasn't really interested in volunteering in other cities. I wanted to do things in East St. Louis. And so what I did was I created my own program. And so Youth in Biz was one of my first programs. And I actually have after-school programs that are based around Youth in Biz. And what they do is they teach entrepreneurial mindset. We talk about problem solving. We teach them about different industries, how small business is a part of the community, and really those things to help to create citizens, great citizens with our youth and young adults, as well as teach them about the economy. Because as long as they don't know how to control the economy will control them. So I'm really big on helping the youth control the narrative around economics and the dollars. So that was the goal. And so that really evolved into my nonprofit, which is the Biz Spot community.
Okay, the Biz Spot community. You know, we were both AmeriCorps Vistas, and for everybody who doesn't know, AmeriCorps Vistas are volunteers in service to America. And with the dynamic brainstorm of Devin, we came up with East Side Works. Let's talk just a little bit about East Side Works and how you feel that we put a dent in poverty, just a little bit.
So it was so great working with you and the rest of the team with Eastside Works, because it was really based on building career pathways for our youth and figuring out those things that not a lot of people talk about. We need to talk about alternative education. Not everyone is going to go to college and get a degree. I really am big on teaching skills. I have multiple degrees and plan on going back to get my PhD, but I'm a firm believer in it's more about the training and what you get out and you being able to make a great life for yourself versus you obtaining a degree because you think that's what you're supposed to do. And so the career pathways work was so great because we got to work with people in different industries, be it IT, finance, so many great people that we helped and made, helped within the healthcare industry.
Exactly.
There was so many industries and opportunities, job shadowing opportunities that we were able to create for those students that wouldn't otherwise have it. So.
One of the things that I thought went well is, and Seth helped us with this as well, was the students in training with Smiles. And we're actually still doing that today. And the Students in Training with Smiles was a program where the students actually got a chance to produce television broadcasts that were aired in the community, and not just our community, in 7 southern Illinois cities. They interviewed AT&T vice presidents and what have you. We really, really had a great time with that. Devin, what have we not talked about in terms of what you're doing currently?
Well, right now, since I've been teaching youth entrepreneurship, and I had been the solo teacher by myself over the last, I'll say, 8 years or so, and give or take, because I just started counting, I know I've reached at least 10,000 students, and that's just within this area, and really looking at how to teach them those skills, how to create leaders, and thinking about that problem-solving piece. And so what I saw that there was a capacity issue, because there's no way that I could teach every child, and that wasn't the goal. The goal was to create a plan and a way to build capacity with teaching these skills. And so right now, I was a entrepreneur in residence at UMSU in what is called their Edpreneur program. And so with the Edpreneur program, there are people who have ideas that can improve education that are both businesses. And so what I created was called the Biz Creator. And my son, who's 13, he was actually the co-founder with me, Gregory. He was the co-founder with me on that. And because he taught me what it should look like, he's a middle school student at Mason Clark, and he said, Mom, you need to make, if you're going to create an online platform, it needs to look like this. And so he showed me some of the tools that they were using, and that's kind of how I'm working to model it off of, so that middle school students will be attracted to it, and ultimately high school students to be able to teach them and teach more students. And so I'm starting at home, have a few pilot groups, and then I'll be starting soon with some other schools.
So you mentioned your son, and tell us a little bit about your family, because as a CEO mom, you brought your daughter with you. I wanted her on camera, but she said next time, and your daughter just graduated from kindergarten.
Yes.
I saw that piece on Facebook. That was wonderful. Tell us a little bit more about your kids and your husband and what everybody's doing.
I have an awesome husband, and we're actually in the process of relocating soon because he's taking an opportunity.
Devin is leaving us, you all. She's relocating soon. We won't let her. Go ahead.
So he's relocating soon. He's been coaching and mentoring for over 20 years, and he's taking the head coach position at Decatur Eisenhower School. So we'll be moving to Decatur, not that far, but we'll be moving there soon. And so I'll be taking all that I'm doing there. So we have a beautiful blended family, and Gregory is our oldest of our second set, our tribe. So we have children ages 2 to 13.
Your tribe.
Our tribe, yes, they're our tribe. So the little boss is 2, Carly, Kennedy 6, Turl is 8, and Gregory is 13.
My goodness. Sis, I don't know how much time we have, but I do have a couple more questions for her. Tell me, how do you think being from East St. Louis helped shape you to be the person you are today? Because we have so many negative stories, but we know internally there's some great things and great people in the city of East St. Louis, Illinois.
Yes.
But tell us, how do you feel that shaped you for success?
I could talk about this, and I do talk about it very often. I could talk about it for days. I am a proud product of the city of East St. Louis. Every place I go, whether I'm out of the country or I'm in a different state, I'm always working to let them know about the real East St. Louis. Yes, every city has its problems and issues, but the education that I received in District 189, my teachers, which I still stay in contact with. I actually was just at a retirement for my French teacher, Mr. Daniels, for teaching over 50 years. Amazing. When I went
Deborah Humphrey Morgan.
Yes, and then I was also at my cousin and CTE coordinator extraordinaire.
She was your cousin.
My cousin. So I come from a family of educators, and I remember saying, I'm not going to be a teacher. And I'm not a certified teacher, but still teaching youth. But I wouldn't trade anything for East St. Louis. The people that I've met, my family, my friends, they're my family. The friends that I've met, I've been friends with them since middle school. We've all pushed and helped each other. Even when we wanted to give up, my very best friends are from East St. Louis, in which I got my first degree, my second degree. And as I said, I had my son my senior year in college. My friends helped to watch him while I finished up classes. So, because he was born in March and I didn't graduate until May. Okay. And so my friends, they helped with watching him while I finished my degree. And they're all from East St. Louis. So the people, the teachers, the village that's there, I wouldn't trade it at all. And it's been a very, very important part, and continues to be a very important part of my life.
What I want people to know as well is that it doesn't matter your age. You can learn from the youth, and the youth can learn from the older. Devin, I'm telling you, she taught me things. We were away on the conference. I tell this story over and over. We were away on that conference, and I'm watching you, Devin, and you were on your phone while the people were speaking, and to me, that was disrespectful. I'm like, why is this girl on her phone? I said, Devin, put that up, right? The mama in me. Devin, put the phone up. You said, I'm researching what they're saying, and I'm taking notes and making sure of accuracy. From that point on, when you see me at a meeting, I'm on my phone. So thank you for that. Thank you. So we about winding up this 15-minute segment. You guys, Devin, I love you so much. Is there anything else you want to share before we...
Yes, actually, I have a surprise for you. And I know you don't like surprises too often.
Right.
But in the fall, you weren't feeling well, and you were one of my honorees. So I wanted to be able to present you with, so the Biz Spot, I had a fundraiser in November.
Oh, my goodness.
And which was the Community CEO Award. And so I wanted to present this with you.
Oh,
rooted in East St. Louis,
on live TV. I am getting this award.
So yeah, rooted in East St. Louis, impacting the region and the nation. So I wanted to present this to you for all that you do. And thank you for being part of my village, because before we became colleagues, you're my best friend's aunt, and I met you in that capacity.
Yes.
And I'm so glad that we've been able to meet and grow on different levels.
Yeah,
so
and I'm learning so much from you, and I just thank God for you so much. Everybody, look at this. Can you see this? Says, give me a hug. God
Thank you
bless
so
you.
much.
God keep you. Don't go away. Well, actually, the live broadcast is going to have to end right now. But for those who will see the entire broadcast coming up, you will see Dr. Desiree Holmes. What's on your mind with Dr. Dez? You know, I told you I enjoy producing shows for other people because I actually did not want to be on the air. I actually wanted to produce for others. And so God is giving me that opportunity with my first protege, and I'm so proud of her. And I don't know if she minds me calling her that, Dr. Desiree Holmes, with her guest, Dr. Keisha Ross. Stay tuned for more Smiles.
Hello and welcome. We have another great show today on What's on Your Mind with Dr. Dez. And so today we have an amazing guest. The guest is Dr. Keisha Ross. And Dr. Keisha Ross is a well qualified clinical psychologist in the immediate area, St. Louis metropolitan area. She has an amazing background, and one of the more current things that Dr. Ross has been involved in is she's the president of the Missouri Psychological Association. She is the former diversity chair for that committee for Missouri Psychological Association. She is a guest lecturer. She does speaking engagements all over. And one of the most powerful things about Dr. Keisha Ross is that, well, she's also my friend and colleague. But today she's going to be here to talk to us about historical trauma. And so let's welcome Dr. Keisha Ross to What's on Your Mind with Dr. Dez. Welcome, Dr. Ross. Yay!
Good morning, Dr. Dez. Thank you so much for having me on the show today.
Thank you for coming. So, Dr. Ross, what we want to talk about today is what is historical trauma. Now, we've talked about trauma in the past on this show. We've educated our viewing audience as to what is trauma. We've talked about the adverse childhood experiences where, you know, abuse, neglect, if family members were substance abuse, mental illness, whatever that category that they fall into, and the combination of things. And so we talked about in previous shows how that can affect adults. So what I want you to do today is, but there's another trauma that we don't really talk about, and it's called historical trauma. So if you would please, as our resident expert on historical trauma, Dr. Ross, talk to us today about historical trauma. What is historical trauma?
Well, historical trauma is most easily described as multi-generational trauma. So what that means is that descendants of individuals who have been exposed to the trauma or the stressor itself can also suffer from, you know, different mental health or physical aspects of, and as well as emotional well-being. So as you talked about childhood trauma, you've probably talked about post-traumatic stress disorder on previous shows. What's different is that an individual does not have to be exposed to the trauma. So what that means is that, you know, I wasn't, you know, a slave. I didn't experience, you know, Jim Crow, but I am descended from ancestors and individuals who have experienced that. So what happens is that over the generations, there are adaptive behaviors that are passed down from one generation to the next. And it is underrepresented and not talked about as often. So I'm very glad to be here and have an opportunity to discuss historical trauma.
Okay, so we're going to jump right into it. So then, Dr. Ross, wow, that was a great intro to historical trauma. So let's get right on into it. So then tell us then, when we talk about historical trauma with regard to certain ethnic and racial groups, what exactly are we talking about then?
So as a result of historical trauma, what we may find is that individuals within communities may internalize, that trauma. So we sometimes call it identification with the oppressor or identification with the aggressor. So individuals who have experienced, traumas, previously. So let's think about slavery. So yes, people will say, well, how does slavery tie into now? Where it ties in is that as the descendants of slaves, there are certain behaviors, there are certain patterns that are prominent now. It's the way people think. It can be the way people eat. It's how people deal with conflict, how individuals deal with relationships. So all of those patterns of behaviors can be impacted by historical events. So, and what I'll do is talk more about specific historical events and particular cultural groups.
So let's talk to us more about, so when you talk about oppression and we're talking about really supremacy, talk to us more about, so what does that look like then?
So oppression and white supremacy is woven into the DNA of America as well as many other diasporas. Whether we think of Africa, the Caribbean, South America, what happens is that we now in modern times have what we call systematic or institutional racism. So we might not have, blacks only or whites only, but we still have a great level of segregation in our country. We still have inequality. If you think about Jim Crow, that is still something that we see from slavery and Jim Crow. Economically, it affects the black community now because white families have 22 times the wealth of the average black family. So we have to think about economics. It impacts our ability to seek education, employment, and just have wealth to pass on from generation to generation. So when you think about slavery, these were individuals who worked for free. We all have our wonderful jobs, maybe a pension, retirement, but we have people who worked for free, gave their labor, and they did not receive anything from it. So what we have now is descendants of slaves who don't have that wealth. But then we have in other communities, those who own slaves, there's wealth that was passed down from community to community. So that impacts physical and mental health of blacks or African Americans, also natives or First Nations people, and Latinos. So people of color, we see there's a disproportionate amount of intergenerational poverty. Okay, so what that means is unequal opportunity. So it doesn't mean that we can't be successful, but it takes more to become successful. So individuals that come from Latino, Black, Native backgrounds, oftentimes we have first generation for college, and the means to do so, it's not there at the same level.
And we also don't want to leave out our Asian brothers and sisters as well, because they too were impacted to a great deal by historical trauma. And so I want, because with What's on Your Mind with Dr. Dez is a show that is geared toward educating about mental health. Can you just touch on then what are some of the impacts regarding our mental health?
Well, we have intergenerational trauma or historical trauma can also be linked with what we call race-based trauma. And race-based trauma means higher levels of stress. That can include racial discrimination, racial profiling, as we talk about inequities in terms of systems, whether it's applying for loans, applying for houses. When individuals are under that level of stress, it means not the highest level of nutrition. If we look in a lot of lower income communities, we find that they're what we call the food deserts. People cannot get live, fresh foods. Think about children going to school, your belly's grumbling, you're hungry, it's more difficult to learn. So we have to think back to like the Black Panther Party. They instituted, the breakfast programs at school so children could eat, because if you're not eating, it becomes difficult to learn. So what you will find is that there's a higher mortality rate for African Americans, particularly African American males. Right here in the East St. Louis and the St. Louis area, certain zip codes, the life expectancy can be as low as 65 years. Whereas like for our white counterparts, it can be up to 73 to 77 years. So we have to think about actually life being cut short because we don't have that equity. There's health disparities when we go for mental health treatment, physical health treatment. It's not that level of equality there. We have to think of infant mortality. So Black babies are 3 times more likely to die at birth. We also have to think about, you know, what that means for a community.
Wow. So Dr. Ross is she's really giving us some very serious, heavy information. And I hope that our audience, our viewing audience, is really paying very close attention, because when we think about how it's impacting our lives today, historical trauma, it has cut our lives short. And so we really need to understand that. And there's something else that I really want us to get in more conversation with, because there is a Dr. Joy DeGruy that's out there, and she talks about historical trauma, and she has a very interesting perspective on that historical trauma piece. And I would like for Dr. Ross to talk more about what her perspective is on that post-traumatic slave syndrome, what that disorder is looking like, and what is that theory all about.
Okay. So going back to, again, linking that the difference between post-traumatic stress disorder is that you would have that individual exposed to the trauma itself, whether it be abuse, neglect, combat, whatever it may be. However, with post-traumatic slave syndrome, what we are saying is that the individual person did not have to be exposed to the trauma. So after, you know, a decade or more of qualitative research, she worked with, you know, African Americans, and she adapted PTSS, or post-traumatic slave syndrome, to basically, you know, identify the adaptive behaviors that Black people or African Americans have adapted over time in order to survive. So think about the fight or flight response. You know, that is instinctively in us to keep us safe if there is imminent danger. However, for, you know, the Black community, there has been so much trauma that has happened over generations that within us, genetically, you know, our genes, you know, get impacted by being exposed to trauma over a long period of time, and our behaviors, we pass those patterns of behaviors over from one generation to the other. So she does a great job in talking about those areas of like learned helplessness, where, you know, people have been exposed so long to being marginalized or disenfranchised that sometimes it becomes difficult. It leads to depression, it leads to anxiety, it leads to anger, making it difficult sometimes to be productive. And all of those symptoms, mentally and emotionally, they impact the physical body.
Yeah.
So it's interconnected, chicken or egg, which comes first, the emotional or the physical. We just know they're entwined. So unfortunately, African Americans are at greater risk of, as I say, fill in the blank. Is it diabetes?
That's right.
Is it cancer? Is it high blood pressure? And part of that is because we are chronically exposed to a higher level of stress than other individuals.
Preach, sister, preach. And so if we think that if we suspect that we are suffering with historical trauma, PTSS, is there anything that we can do about that?
Of course. Part of it, of course, is recognizing what's going on, seeking wise counsel. Of course, this could be through psychological treatment. It could be therapy. It could be psychological assessment, which means finding appropriate diagnoses of what's going on. For some individuals, it might mean medication in addition to psychotherapy. It also means being active in our community, because the healing has to happen individually, but then we also have to work within the community to heal as well. And, you know, as we said, the Black community, Latino, Native American populations, they're at greater risk for community violence and so many other issues. The Association of Black Psychologists, which is a national organization, also has a local St. Louis chapter. They have what's called emotional emancipation circles, and that is run by Black psychologists who are trained to have safe space for individuals to process and work through this. We also have national organizations for each particular group. There's an Asian Psychological Association, as well as Native American, as well as Latino. So those are ways that we can work on healing, as well as social advocacy, because sometimes we can feel helpless or hopeless. So part of what we need to do is be empowered, and be empowered means to help others. So that's how I started the diversity committee for the Missouri Psychological Association. I saw that it wasn't happening, and rather than complain about it, I said, you know, let me create an opportunity to train others in cultural competence, whether they be colleagues or psychologists, as well as it being two-pronged and being able to work in the community. And that can be churches, it can be mosques, it can be also helping other community services as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. And so what we are going to do is at the end of this show, we will make sure that we include and incorporate some of that information. So anyone who would like to look up the Missouri Psychological Association Diversity Committee, we will make sure that we have that information there for you. And so for a final thought, Dr. Ross, is there any final thought that you would like to leave us with today for our viewing audience?
What I'd really like to leave with is that this is something, historical trauma is something that has been there, but it hasn't been talked about. And we have a great deal of research on race-based trauma, historical trauma now, that shows that there is an actual impact on the physical body, the mental health, the emotional well-being of individuals that have been exposed to historical trauma. And we have a legacy in our country of not talking about it. So we're at a place that this is the first step, but it has to be an ongoing, continuous conversation. So I'm glad that this was, you know, a beginning to open up to talk about such an important topic.
And anyone interested in trying to reach out to you, do you have contact information?
I do have contact information. I can be reached best by email, and that would be drkeishaross@gmail.com. That's DrKeishaRoss@gmail.com.
Dr. Ross, you have provided us with amazing information today, information that I'm sure is very new to the community. And thank you for sharing your level of knowledge and expertise. I truly, truly appreciate it. And if you get the opportunity to come back, will you please come back to What's on Your Mind with Dr. Dez?
I definitely will. Thank you so much.
Very, very good. So again, I want to thank Dr. Ross for coming to What's on Your Mind with Dr. Dez, for sharing on today's topic. We're talking about historical trauma. It was a wonderful and outstanding piece. And so again, we want to invite you to come see us on SMilesTV, where you will find What's on Your Mind with Dr. Dez and her guest. And remember that on What's on Your Mind with Dr. Dez, we are here transforming lives and renewing minds. Thank you again.
Thank you again for tuning into Smiles TV, the best community affairs broadcast in the world. Now I'm going to claim that one. Dr. Dez is always great. Her guests are always wonderful. And today's guest did not leave us wanting. I want to thank Devin Moody Graham, the CEO mom. You guys, look these people up. They're offering some great things to the world. Remember, only what you do for Christ will last. And Jesus is the Lord. The Lord be magnified. Keep smiling. You look better when you smile.
Imagination. Image a world. IDEX Media.
Awesome sauce. Yeah, baby.
The Smiles Television Talk Show wants to showcase your business, organization, church, and activities. If you have an interest in being a guest on Smiles Television Talk Show, or if you have any show ideas, contact Stephanie Anthony Miles at smilestv777@gmail.com. You may also call 618-741-3770. Tell your friends to subscribe to the Smiles YouTube channel. Let Smiles TV increase your reach. Remember, you look better with smiles.